Snell, and tonight we're going to be talking about a new bill in Massachusetts, Bill H 4672, that just passed within the House. It's financial literacy in education within Massachusetts. That's what the basis of the bill is on. So we're going to discuss the bill specifically and then go over just financial literacy in general and the impact of utilizing it in education and teaching students about it. So here's our overview for today. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about us at Quarantine Racism Educational Services. Then I'm going to introduce you to our team. I'm going to discuss a little bit about my background. I'm going to go into our introduction of the topic, go into the specifics of Bill H 4672, define financial literacy, debunk some of the misconceptions about financial literacy, what exactly it means, and go over financial literacy and the history of systemic racism and the generational wealth gap. And then I will be discussing the impact of financial literacy and why it's important in our education system, why it's important to be teaching students about this. And then I will go on to conclude. So, a little bit about us at Quarantine Racism Educational Services. Our motto is Black Learners Matter Too. We're dedicated to serving students, supporting teachers, admin, and parents through emphasizing equity and the strengths of diversity in the classroom. So, we are Black owned, veteran owned. We provide free resources such as toolkits and guides for educators. We have an equity professional development course. We have textbooks for sale. We have free articles, graphics, and videos on our various initiatives and current events within education and education policy. We do live stream presentations such as this one and panel discussions as well on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have a new Spotlight Speaker series, which I started to feature guest speakers. Parents can join, educators, administrators, students, etc. So if you actually would like to leave a comment and you want to discuss a certain issue, or you've been wanting to engage in education advocacy or policy, then you should definitely reach out and we could see if we'll be able to put something together for that with our Spotlight Speaker series. And we go live on our Quarantine Racism Educational Services Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube accounts. And then below, I provided my link. So it's www.quarantineracism.com/ref equals Hannah. So this is our team here. Dr. Campbell is our founder, based in New Jersey. He's a former principal, educator, and math teacher. His areas of expertise are educational services, consulting, and tax preparation. Dr. Al Mumin is a racial equity brand ambassador based in Nevada. She's a former professor. Her areas of expertise are grant acquisition, adult learning, and transformative education. And there's me, Hannah Carsonell, and I'm a former grassroots organizer. My areas of expertise are policy research and analysis, grassroots and nonprofit work, as well as cultural anthropology. So here is my background. I received my bachelor's in political science with a minor in anthropology in 2022 from UMass Amherst, and I gained my master of public policy in 2023. My areas of expertise within the policy field are racial justice, energy policy, and environmental justice, education policy, criminal justice reform, and disability policy. Then anthropology, my areas of expertise are cultural anthropology, African American anthropology, Native American anthropology, forensic anthropology, and political anthropology. So, my experience outside of academia, I have 7 years of nonprofit work and grassroots organizing experience, from racial justice activism to gun reform and gun violence prevention advocacy, civic engagement, voter registration, and restoration campaigns. Previously worked on And I've worked on issues of environmental racism and environmental justice, energy policy, and education policy. So, introduce today's topic. As the US education and economic system, our country has been disrupted and dismantled federally. The Massachusetts State House recently passed a bill calling for financial literacy to be taught within schools. And we're going to talk about the importance of that, especially at this time and in general. So, Bill H 4672, within the Committee on Ways and Means in the Massachusetts State House, the House passed it on October 28th. So it's called an act relative to teacher preparation and student literacy. So within this, financial literacy isn't the only part within this bill, but I really wanted to highlight that because I think it's imperative and it's something that's discussed a lot where, people will say, I learned this in whatever class and I never really used it in my life, but I wish I had a class where I could learn about credit, financial literacy, things like that. So I really think that's an imperative part of the bill, and that's why I'm focusing on it tonight. But there are other things in here which I will discuss. So there are requirements for capstone projects and financial literacy courses within this bill. There are EOC tests for core classes and capstone projects. There is a MyCap requirement, which is a career and academic plan for each student. There are also free FAFSA and MASFA application requirements put in this bill, and again, financial literacy course requirement is what I'll be focusing on. So, what is financial literacy? Financial literacy entails having the knowledge and comprehension of financial concepts and risks, along with the skills and attitudes needed to apply this understanding to make effective decisions across a range of financial contexts. Its aim is to improve the financial well being of individuals and society, enabling active participation in economic life. So, I wanted to debunk some of the misconceptions about financial literacy because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about it, including myself previously. I have had some misconceptions about it, or how some people will speak about it and speak of it in a way where they're kind of belittling those of a lower economic status and expecting people to, when they can't save money because of just how expensive everything is and how their bills are, just expecting them to, invest however much, like invest $1,000 into this, and they don't have that. So that is not what financial literacy is. It's often misconstrued and weaponized against those of a lower economic status, as I said. And it doesn't mean picking yourself up by the bootstraps. Financial literacy is more about the knowledge of finance, credit, bank statements, financial aid applications, etc. It's the knowing of it and being able to apply it.
My biggest
So
financial
When you
I
look at systemic racism,
wanted to share some videos, people describing.
hot take is that we are setting Black children up for failure by consistently teaching financial literacy curriculum that revolves around entrepreneurship. I have done in my professional career so many of those programs where you volunteer and you go to a school and you teach them about financial literacy, and everybody knows it's always condescending, it's always like bootstraps, but the curriculum's also always about entrepreneurship, and it drives me nuts. For me, the goal should be trying to get as many of these Black children into the middle class as possible. And that's not the goal of an entrepreneurship curriculum. The goal of that is to create a rags to riches story. Not all of those students can be wealthy. Capitalism would literally collapse without having an underclass of workers who are desperate enough to work for extremely low wage jobs. And the creators of these programs and these curriculums, they know that, and they're willing to sacrifice the majority of these students to have one or two rags to riches stories that makes other young Black children feel like, oh, I can do that too. The majority of them are not going to get to that point. We should be teaching them about home ownership, which is the main way that most Black families are accumulating any kind of wealth. We should be teaching them about investing for retirement, 401ks, how to customize your 401k when they do get jobs, as well as like down payment assistant programs, scholarships, what kind of schools to look at, what kind of programs have a lot of vacancies, what kind of jobs like are easy to transition to if you don't have a whole lot of wealth sitting in the bank or connections through your parents to get internships. But no, we're telling them just be an entrepreneur. Everybody has to take risk. It's the best way to make money. And it's not. And we're also teaching them it's the only way to have any kind of freedom. Like, oh, be your own boss. It's always be your own boss. The richest person I know works for himself. The next 50 richest people I know work for that man. There are so many wealthy people who work for other people, and there's no shame in that because everybody recognizes that in order to start a successful business, you have to know about the industry. You have to have a certain amount of industry knowledge. You have to have capital. That's a big one. You really should have connections, and you have to have some kind of business sense. Ideally, from having seen it at work, wherever you worked for the beginning of your career. Telling children to go start a business when they have no capital and they don't know which markets are profitable, they don't know how to do any kind of business analysis, and you're not even advising maybe that they seek out post-secondary education or certificates to learn about businesses. And a lot of the successful businesses out there are from people who get an associate's and have a trade and then start a business around their trade, like a flooring company, a roofing company, HVAC, whatever it may be. But no, we're just telling them do whatever your passion is and make it into your job. And then when they start a hoodie brand with $500 that they saved up to get the freaking samples and just have to rely on pre-orders and then realize, oh, this isn't a profitable business, now what? I just think it's so irresponsible. And, when you spend time around wealthy people, you come to realize they are not giving that kind of advice at all. They're telling their children, okay, you want to be wealthy, go into private equity, investment banking, consulting, start with an internship the summer after your freshman year, be on that track, do that for a couple years, exploit the people. And then when you can't handle that anymore, start working in-house at another big corporation in the financial department, work your way up to CFO or CEO or whatever it may be, and then boom, you don't have to start your own company. You can be in charge of somebody else's. I don't know. I just think it's the kind of advice you would give your worst enemy, personally.
So I think that was really important to share, as I said, with a lot of the misconceptions and the ways that financial literacy is spoken about. And I think it's really great how this bill has introduced like kind of the opposite of like the bad rep that the idea of financial literacy gets, but it actually, the course that would be implemented would be really preparing students for their future and giving them the tools and having them know what to do with that, with those tools. Then I wanted to share a video about the history of systemic racism and the generational wealth gap and how that ties into financial literacy as well.
When you look at systemic racism, you're looking at trends that have affected the wealth gap between the races historically in the United States. This is not about a person being a racist or your grandma being a racist. It has to do with what the economy looked like for white persons and black persons historically in this country. Back during the time of the Civil War, the white folks had 56 times more wealth on average than a black person. So it was 56 to 1. Just 10 years later, in 1870, after Reconstruction, that gap went from 56 to 1 to 23 to 1. Pretty dramatic improvement in 10 years. The reason for that market improvement is that while black people were now allowed to purchase land and assets, so black wealth was going up, simultaneously white wealth was coming down because what was a huge part of their wealth? Slaves. human beings that they were no longer allowed to own. By 1900, the gap had closed all the way to 11 to 1. The average white person had 11 times more wealth than the average black person. And then it stalled out. And the reason it stalled out is because black people were still being discriminated against. They didn't have the same access to credit, if any access to credit. Legislative attempts at narrowing the gap were shot down, trying to finish narrowing the gap were shot down, like the 40 acres and a mule thing that never got passed. They faced widespread discrimination in education. The schools were still segregated and they weren't getting the best funding and they weren't getting the best teachers. They were discriminated against in the workforce. Now from 1900, when it was 11 to 1, to 1960, over 60 years, the gap squeezed a little bit smaller to 8 to 1. So for every black family that had $10,000 in total assets, the average white family had 80,000 in total assets, okay? And how did we go from 11 to 1 to 8 to 1? Well, a couple things happened. FDR made it illegal to discriminate against black workers, but only for purposes of the military and government positions. But still, every little bit helps. And then also, you had World War I and World War II. So many white men left the American workforce that black men were finally able to start moving up into higher paid positions. That doesn't mean they were paid the same as the white person who had previously done that job, but they were being paid more than they were previously, and they were getting access to higher skilled work. So then by the 1980s, the gap had closed to 5 to 1. And what was helping close the gap? Civil rights that had taken place between 1965 and 1980. Fair Housing Act, the federal minimum wage that did not discriminate. So those things were helping close that gap just a little bit. So that takes us up to 1980, but what has happened in the last 45 years? We were at 5 to 1 gap. How much have we closed since then? None. In the last 45 years, we've gone backwards. So we are now at a 6 to 1 gap. The average white family has 6 times more wealth than the average black family. And why is that happening? Well, because wealth compounds. It's not just about who has the ability to earn X salary. It's that the white families were starting with more wealth, more property, more stocks, bonds, etc. And they're able to compound that wealth. Whereas if the black and brown populations are starting without those assets, they don't have the ability to compound. They end up having to spend what they earn. They have to consume the majority of the income that they're earning just to sustain a living. This isn't about blaming an individual. It's not about vilifying people. What it is about is exploring and understanding the economics behind why we have that gap so that we can address those things with policy moving forward.
So I think that was really important as well to kind of go over the history of the generational wealth gap within this country and to touch upon the impact of this bill utilizing financial literacy within schools can have. So the impact of financial literacy and its importance in education would be that it reduces financial stress, increases responsible financial decisions, a more secure and stable future, effective money management, emergency preparation is better. People are able to meet goals more and avoid unnecessary debt. It gives individuals the confidence to make informed financial decisions, to take advantage of opportunities, and to build financial security. It provides students with financial knowledge that gives them the tools necessary to navigate various financial challenges within the future, such as dealing with student loans, credit card debt, etc. So they will be aware of this before they're faced with it. So in conclusion, in a time where the state of the US economy and education system is deeply unstable, and in a country with a racial wealth gap due to systemic racism, it's imperative to educate everyone on financial literacy. And the earlier on that we do so, the better off we are. And the mandatory financial literacy courses that would occur as a result of Bill 4672 would have a pivotal impact on students as well as on their futures and their well-being overall, and should be implemented in various other states, I believe. So those are my sources that I used today. And here's how you can contact us. I have our Quarantine Racism accounts on here. All of our social media accounts are Quarantine Racism Educational Services. And Dr. Campbell, I have his email and LinkedIn, the Quarantine Racism email, Dr. Moomin's information, as well as my contact information and my referral link again. Thank you.